story, but we hope. Inshallah. Yahya has 20 years of experience in public policy engagement over British Muslim affairs at community, national and international levels. And he's written over a dozen peer-reviewed academic articles on aspects of all sorts of issues to do with Muslim life, and most importantly for us as converts to Islam, history of Islam in Britain. He's a strong advocate of robust, independent community development, and he lives in West Yorkshire with his family and 2 cats, no less. He often talks about his gardening and how his roses are doing and developing on Facebook. So we keep up with all his activities, extracurricular activities. Amongst the literary articles and books that Yahya has authored, co-authored, and fulfilled the role of editor and translator are several addressing British secularism, Islam, society, and state. The ones most important, though, are the ones that I feel are important to us as a group here today. His latest, I think his latest, because he just churns them out one after another, so I can't be sure that this is his latest, Our Fatima of Liverpool, was the story of Fatima Cates, the Victorian woman who helped found British Islam in Liverpool. And not only did he write the book in association with another brother, but he organized a day's event in Liverpool where all of us, or most of us, or some of us here attended, which was a fantastic bringing together of converts to Islam from all over the country. Islam in Victorian Liverpool, an Ottoman account of Britain's first mosque and community, and Abdullah Quilliam's selected writings. I left one to last because he also brought together the collected poems of Abdullah Quilliam. Now, I don't know what really sparked off an intensity there when he did that, but he discovered he was a poet and he didn't know it, because then he embarked on a pilgrimage himself, an Umrah, during, I think it was just during COVID or just after COVID, where he wrote Pandemic Pilgrimage, the poems from Bradford to Mecca and Medina. Such a wonderful collection of inner thoughts and expressions and so on and so forth from Yahya. And I read them as he was writing them in Mecca in his Umrah. He even wrote an ode to his flip-flops. So if you're really interested, that is a book you should really read. It's beautiful, really, really beautiful. He loves walking and being grumpy about the state of the world, but dreams of radical solutions. And as the Convert Muslim Foundation, we cater for all ages and everything. We do intend to set up the Grumpy Men's Society here, of which we hope that Yahya will play a central role in leading it forward. So, inshallah, I give you our brother Yahya Burt. Jazakallah khair.
The mic is fixed, but get it where you're comfortable with. Okay, can I shut this or will that get rid of the display? Because I've just got. Okay. All right. Okay.
As far as I understand, there'll be time for comments and questions after Yahya's presentation. So please feel free to write down your notes and to ask him questions when he's finished.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's a great pleasure to be here, great honor to be here at the launch of Covert Care. And I see lots of dear, familiar faces. I hope we can catch up today sometime. And also new faces, people that you know through the internet but you haven't met before. This strange familiarity at a distance that is our lives today, that you feel you know someone quite well who you've never met. So, nice to see you too. Today I want to make the case that we Muslim converts in Britain should see ourselves as a community. A convert community, to make an educated guess, that numbers over 150,000. A multicultural convert community that is distinct. yet is part of the various diverse communities that make up Britain's 3.9 million Muslims today. There are 4 reasons why I think we should focus on strengthening our sense of shared identity as a convert community. The first reason is that after 1979, we have seen the largest sustained conversion of British peoples to Islam in the island's history. So now we have the sheer size to start thinking of ourselves as a collective. The second reason is that this community building is already happening. We are getting organized. Today is evidence of that. We have our own scholarly class emerging, and we have 30 to 40 convert care and reception groups around the country, a respectable number of whom are here today. The work that you do with care and compassion can, and I would venture to say should, be seen as the vital building blocks of a convert community. It is you who are forging connections and building a sense of community to those who might otherwise think they are isolated and friendless after having taken their shahadas. The balancing act we should set out to achieve as we build professional structures to support our convert community should be to hold on to our Islamic values of volunteering in the path of Allah, fi sabilillah, and of showing care and compassion, of being good friends to those who feel isolated. As we develop them, we would do well to remember that the main point of professional structures, in short, a tiny paid professional corps organizing and supporting an army of volunteers. The point of these structures is to provide a continuity of service, but not to become soulless technocrats who speak a jargon-filled language as opposed to an inspiring, faithful one. All the kind of, work you have to do behind the scenes, it shouldn't enter into our public language or the way that we relate to each other. So it's that compartmentalization is essential. The third reason we should be thinking of ourselves as a convert community is that I would argue for the need to think beyond structures of convert reception alone. And this is not to downgrade the importance of that reception. We all know its absence is very problematic. But we are currently focused on the first few steps converts take after uttering the 2 Shahada testimonies of faith, the Shahadatain, but less so on those who come before and after, who lie upstream or downstream from those who have just entered Islam. In other words, how much attention are we giving to the call to Islam and to building a convert community? There are many questions we could ask about the state of the call of Islam, Dawah, in the 21st century Britain. Today I will only pose a few of them for us to reflect on. Are we too bound up in contemporary Islam's sectarian battles to articulate a distinctively contextualized call to Islam in Britain? Are we too focused on appeasing public opinion within our own multi-sectarian Muslim community at the expense of alienating, confusing, or even ignoring what might truly resonate with the British public at large? In other words, are we too inwardly focused? Are we too caught up in the travails of the Ummah and combating Islamophobia? It is not one duty over another in a zero-sum game, but rather, are we getting the balance right? That's the question we have to ask. And in considering compassion and care beyond the first few months or years after the Shahada, should we be thinking more about building a convert community for the long term, one that is multi-generational? For converts, this can be an existential question. How often have I had discussions with fellow converts worried about the ultimate fate of their parents siblings, and friends, and about Islam being preserved in their own children. Converts have a profound need to belong to a community that will continue on, rather than being shooting stars in the night who burn brightly for a moment before fading away for good. I do not wish to reopen the debate today about the merits of convert over revert. Rather, I would argue it obscures a bigger and more important set of considerations. It's a distraction. I would contend that we are clinging to the convert-revert debate as a way to avoid the difficulties we find in articulating a composite identity that reflects both our faith and our cultural identity as Muslims in Britain. The convert-revert binary acts as a polite proxy in the absence of a settled cultural alternative for us. As we converts say ourselves, the Prophet's companions were all converts but were not referred to as such throughout their lifetimes. Rather, they were just Muslims or faithful followers of God and His Prophet. We converts are just Muslims too, in that sense, okay? But, or yet, this does not mean that we are cultureless Muslims either. So what other alternatives are out there? What other alternatives should we seek if we're going to marry together our faith and culture into one harmonious whole? After all, Islam is a universal tradition and the final dispensation between God and humanity. So Islam is manifested throughout all human cultures. All human cultures can be, in principle, married to Islam. To belong to the Ummah, we converts, British converts, we do not need to become culturally Malay, Pakistani, Nigerian, or Arab. Although many of us might have assumed so when we first converted and encountered versions of Islam embedded in various cultures. But the answer to that is not to make a false claim to a pure, deculturated Islam, an Islam without culture. There is, I tell you, my brothers and sisters, no such thing in this world. There is no such thing in this world as an Islam without culture. This is a kind of myth that has been propagated and that we have imbibed uncritically for decades, and we must put it to bed. Okay? Every community must marry its faith with its culture. This is its challenge, its burden, and its opportunity. So our challenge is to re-articulate the principles of Islam within our own cultural context, to render Islam in the vernacular, to express it in idiomatic forms. That's our challenge, our burden, and our opportunity. Being British is a civic, political identity that is meant, in theory at least, okay, I'm not talking about practice, in theory at least, to cover the 4 nations that make up the United Kingdom, as well as all those who gain British citizenship or permanent residency, okay? Thus, it is an identity that all Muslims in this country may rightly lay claim to, and they typically do. Like many previous polls have shown, I'll take one poll from 2016, it showed that 86% of British Muslims identified as British. That was 3% more than the general population, and that poll is not untypical. In fact, polls taken over many years have basically said the same thing. So Muslims of all sorts of different cultural backgrounds lay easy claim to being British. So it's not an exclusive cultural identity. Britishness is a multicultural identity that's largely political. Okay, largely it's a civic and political identity at this moment in our history. So the problem still remains about culture, I believe, once we get down below Britishness, which I think is a political identity. It seems to me, and this may be controversial, that it seems to me as an Englishman, there is a less complicated pride for Muslims claiming to be Welsh and Scottish, as part of a cultural and civic nationalisms that today are more confident and inclusive. Okay? But identifying as an English Muslim is much more fraught, is much more complicated. We're talking about 80% of the population here in the British Isles, so it's an important question. In its isolationist mode, Englishness becomes xenophobic and a stand-in for a kind of uniform whiteness, nostalgia for empire and its last great victory, the defeat of Nazi Germany. Mental and physical boundaries go up and minorities and outsiders get scapegoated. Yet, Englishness in an accommodating mode, not in its kind of exclusive mode, but in its other mode, which is an accommodating mode, Englishness drives Britishness as a whole, as a civic and political identity. Okay, although the Scots and the Welsh and the Catholics in Northern Ireland will always contest that assumed dominance of what Britishness is by the English, but the English always do that. So while Brexit has left the UK politically adrift, leaving the EU has tamed isolationist English nationalism for the time being. Either side of the Brexit referendum of 2016, British and English identities flipped. In 2011, 19% saw themselves as British only, while 58% saw themselves as solely English. 58%, that was in 2011. But after the Brexit referendum and leaving the EU in 2021, 55% saw themselves as British and 15% only saw themselves as only English. So Brexit lanced the boil in this last decade of a sort of isolationist Englishness, okay? But what that means is we've gone back to assuming, the English have gone back to assuming they can dominate what Britishness means. That still leaves the problem of cultural identity. So this switching between an exclusive Englishness, which can be read as whiteness, when English is acting in an exclusive mindset, okay, and an inclusive Englishness that drives Britishness as a civic identity really leaves English converts to Islam in a cultural quandary, a cultural puzzle. This is why I'll speak for myself personally here, I'm quite averse to identifying as an English Muslim. If by that people think I'm finding a polite way to identify as a white Muslim, okay? After all, okay, Islam is anti-racist to its core. Only the God consciousness that produces true piety, taqwa in us, counts with God. The fact that we have different languages, nations, tribes, cultures, colors, and so on, is a matter of celebrating God's creative power and intent for his creation, rather than, as it inevitably does, become a way for one group to make a false claim of superiority over another. You know, I refer you to the Quran, verses 30, 22, and my favorite in Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 13. And the truth is that converts in England are themselves diverse. So our collective identity must reflect rather than diminish that. We are a multicultural convert community within a multicultural set of Muslim communities. All this is another way of saying that to make Englishness work for Muslim converts, it must embody an inclusive cultural identity. Englishness will have to condition itself to those possibilities of openness that have arisen repeatedly throughout our history, although arguably in the minor rather than the major key. For me, the keys to finding an Englishness I can identify with are personal and cultural. They are bound up with our language, our literature, our myth, our landscape, our customs, our history, and our heritage. It cannot be a collective political project for me, as the English have not let go of our instinct to descend into xenophobia and racism when we feel threatened. You know, as a non-Muslim youth, the English subculture I felt most at home with was two-tone, in which black, brown, and white working class youths created their own indigenous hybrid movement, reflected in music, fashion, and anti-racism activism. I mean, dates me, but you know, in the 70s and 80s, that's what I loved, and that's what I knew. And that to me was Englishness that I could be proud of. Okay, that was my Englishness. And I realize there's not one kind of Englishness. What I'm saying to you is we have to fight for the Englishness that we want. And so the Englishness that I grew up with in London was not closed but open. And we still have to be alive to these possibilities again, especially after Brexit. So these are big, perennial questions, but ones that I hope you will discuss over this weekend and after. Whatever answers we reach, they are best sought collectively after mutual discussion, debate, and consultation. This brings me to my fourth and final reason, which I will focus on for the rest of this lecture. To create a stronger communal identity as British Muslim converts, we need to shape our own narrative about who we are. And an essential part of that is to figure out where we came from. As George Orwell wrote in 1984, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. So the dominant narrative about Muslim converts in Britain chalks out a past which we never controlled ourselves, a cacophony of negative stereotypes. We have been called infidels, renegades, Turks, terrorists, mavericks, and eccentrics. In sum, these epithets express and recycle contradictory feelings that the British have about converts, feelings of betrayal, fear, hatred, amusement, and contempt. Yet there is also an unhelpful response to this stereotyping by framing conversion through the lens of the sheer diversity of individual stories, individual pathways to Islam, which as motives and life stories are individualized and endless. This works against us understanding the larger forces at play that would help us frame a more coherent convert history for ourselves. Instead, I propose to look at the larger historical forces at play in the conversion story of the British peoples who became Muslim, and when did that conversion process become intensified? What were those moments? Why did they happen? So my preliminary thoughts are that there have been two main factors. The first is an expanded opportunity of contact with the undistorted message of Islam and with devout Muslims. And more surprisingly, the second is large-scale social, moral, and political disruption, which I might say I'm not going to, but I could provocatively call fitna. Okay? I say this because our history shows that it's only during periods of radical disruption, allied with contact, that conversion accelerates for a time, as British people have sought out alternatives to the status quo, one of which has been Islam. So I want to argue that we have to seize control of our own story in order to build our community now and in the future. Otherwise, others will tell our story for us in ways we will not like. And we converts need to have that sense of rootedness of our own history, our own narrative, our own tradition, in order to give us necessary perspective on the present and to give us hope and courage for the future. So currently, there is no comprehensive or coherent narrative history about the conversion to Islam of British peoples, which, although it has persisted over 8 centuries, is consequently not well understood, even among converts. There is no single book that brings this long history into one overarching story, although Abdul Hakim Murad's essay from 20 years ago provides a foundation upon which to build it. Today I shall endeavour to chalk out some preliminary reflections on this 800-year-old story, how it might be told, and what insights we could gain from our past to illuminate our present and future. I propose we see this conversion history as a story in 4 parts: the age of Christendom, the age of discovery and empire, the age of counterculture and post-imperialism, and the age of Islamic establishment in Britain. So the age of Christendom, in my way of telling the story, stretches from 1187 until 1942. Our story begins with the Crusades, which were portrayed by Christian theologians as a recovery of what had been lost. to the dangerous seduction of Islam. The Crusades were fought on divine authority. The church wielded two swords, one for the heretic and another for the rebel, and the Muslim was both at once. Yet despite that, there are records of crusaders converting to Islam. Conversion was common in both directions, including of Muslims and Jews to Christianity, especially after a defeat by crusader forces. But there are many more instances of Franks converting to Islam. Latin and Arab chronicles tell of repeated instances in which Christian warriors could not withstand the hardships of battle, crossed the enemy lines, and converted to Islam. For example, 6 knights were said to have crossed the lines and converted at the Battle of Hattin in 1187. The Franks, or the Ifranj, as the Muslims called the Crusaders, converted during the Second Crusade, the fall of Jerusalem, and the Fifth Crusade. Crossing the lines was so common that when St. Francis of Assisi came to preach Christianity to the Muslims, they assumed that he had come to convert himself. The English Templar renegade knight said to have converted to Islam in 1185 was Robert of St. Albans. The historian Roger of Howden claimed in his chronicles that Robert had left Christianity and gone over to Salah ad-Din Ayyubi. It is said that he had married a great-granddaughter or niece of the Sultan and later led a cavalry detachment as part of the effort to retake Jerusalem. Howden is unclear about what Robert's fate was after the battle. He claims Robert's force was defeated outside the gates of the city and that he barely escaped with his life. It has become popular on Muslim social media to tout Sir Roger as the first English convert, but alas, while the Templars were infamous in Christendom for converting to Islam, the exaggerated features of this story lend weight to a more skeptical view that it was made up due to rivalries between different monastic orders to show the Templars in a worse light. Besides, the story is uncorroborated by other contemporary sources, whether Crusader or Muslim. But not all conversions came during battle. Crusader law and canon law both deal with Franks who had converted to Islam in peacetime. A letter from Pope Celestine III dealt with the case of a Frank who had moved to a Muslim country, converted, and then returned to Frankish lands with his Muslim wife and children. Christians abandoned by spouses who had crossed the lines and converted were the subject of a papal bull from Alexander III on whether they could marry someone else. It was not just knights who travelled to the Holy Land, but also many common folk who also crossed the lines for a variety of reasons, due to them, according to one hostile Christian chronicler called Vitry, to them being wretched or in despair. Whatever the true motives, they are difficult to discern through such hostile Christian commentary. And moreover, the scale of conversion cannot be measured precisely from the sources that we have. However, the widespread existence of conversion to Islam during the Crusades is indisputable. The power and majesty of Islam could still seduce Christians across such hardened battle lines. So moving on to the second period where conversion intensified, what I call the age of discovery of empire, which for me spreads from 1492 until 1887. In my schema, 1492 marks the pivot between Christendom and the age of discovery and empire in our story. In that year, Granada, the last Muslim kingdom of Al-Andalus, fell, and Christopher Columbus found the Americas and seeking out a westward route to India. European maritime exploration of the New World and the East was the prelude to empire, and it opened up these isles. Please switch your phones off. That would be much appreciated. So, sorry, I lost my thread. European maritime exploration of the New World and the East was the prelude to empire, and it opened up these isles to Islam. Broadly speaking, there were 4 conduits for this opening up of Britain to Islam. The first conduit was Barbary, and the capture and sometime conversion of Englishmen willingly or otherwise. In the period between 1558 and 1685, Muslim naval power dominated the Mediterranean, and proximity with a more powerful religious and military civilization made contact with Europe inevitable. But what is remarkable about this is the reach of Islamic sea power into the British Isles themselves, obviously in northwestern Europe, on the periphery of Europe, which is surprising. There were privateer ships that sailed under official Ottoman and Moroccan patronage, and these sailors were regarded as warriors defending the Muslims and Islam. Indeed, many were exiled Moriscos. Moriscos were those after the Reconquista of Spain, that they lived secretly as Muslims, but then they were expelled in 1610. But they didn't go away. They moved to North Africa, where they waged a jihad against the Spanish subsequently, and it was a naval jihad. And so these exiled Moriscos were seeking redress for their expulsion from Spain. The Egyptian historian al-Maqrizi remarked that their seaborne jihad had become famous. Thousands of captives were taken in raids on Southern Ireland, Wales, and England, including the Severn and Thames estuary. And believe it or not, between 1627 and 1634, the Saleh rover, Saleh was a major port in North Africa, led by the Dutch convert Jan Jansen, occupied Lundy in the Bristol Channel, flying an Ottoman flag and conducting slaving raids from the island before transferring captives to Algiers for sale. Some British converts have claimed this meant the Sharia was enforced in a tiny part of 17th century England. I don't know about that, but maybe. In 1670, a petition was presented to Charles II on behalf of 140 men from Stepney in East London who had been captured by the Algerians. Many of these captives found the upward social mobility and religious tolerance in Ottoman, Moroccan North Africa very appealing and converted. One key figure was the Barbary corsair John Ward, later known as Yusuf Rais, who is said to have been the inspiration for Captain Jack Sparrow of Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean film franchise. Of humble origins from Faversham, Ward abandoned a naval career for piracy. He later converted to Islam and became the scourge of Catholic Spain, which had expelled the Moriscos, as I said earlier, commanding his own fleet and building a magnificent palace in Tunis. One sea shanty has Ward dictating terms to the English King James I as an equal. Go tell the King of England, go tell him this from me. If he reign king of all the land, I will reign king at sea. So you can see where Johnny Depp got his inspiration from. The second conduit was the Reformation via various dissident Protestant sects, from Socinianism to Deism, later Unitarianism and Methodism, which from the 16th century right through to the 20th century has provided entry points into Islam. Some of these Protestant sects were viewed as heretical because they rejected the doctrine of the Trinity, but you can see how, given that, they would act as stepping stones to Islam. Another allied third conduit was what might be called a tradition of Islamic republicanism in the radical English Enlightenment during the period of revolutions that were going on in Europe, the Glorious Revolution of 1688, the American Revolution of 1776, the French Revolution in 1789, and the Haitian Revolution in 1791. So by this Islamic republicanism, the scholar Humberto Garcia means the tradition of radical English Protestants like Blake and Coleridge, who used the example of Islam and especially Ottoman tolerance to critique English religious intolerance and monarchical absolutism, the divine right of kings, that the English king was above the law. So they critiqued this sort of untouchability, if you like, and compared him disfavorably to the figure of the Sultan. A remarkable figure and text to come out of this age of discovery and empire was the dissident Henry Stubb, who lived in the 17th century, whose account of the rise and the progress of Mohammedanism, published around 1676, completed around 1676, was the first positive account of the Prophet in a European language. Controversial in its day, it only circulated privately among deists, or Mohammedan Christians, as their critics called them. It was only published in 1911, imagine that, in London by an early network of Muslim activists there. Before Stubb, no English deist or Socinian appealed to Islam to argue for strict monotheism, a monotheism without the doctrine of the Trinity. But rather they appealed to reason. And Stubb was the first to base his biography of the Prophet on original Arabic sources translated into Latin. His life of the Prophet is chronological history rather than a theological refutation of Islam. In Stubb, we encounter the first true English Islamophile, an Abu Talib, or one who is curious and open-minded about Islam and supportive of Muslims without, to our knowledge, ever converting. The Islamophile is an important figure in our story because all too often it is he or she who leaves the door open for others to enter the house of Islam. The fourth conduit was empire, the British Empire, which alongside all of its prejudice and plunder also created opportunities for the curious and the open-minded to go native and embrace Islam. There are a multitude of examples that one might give. To mention some names of those who found Islam through growing up in or travelling to the Muslim world: Thomas Keith, the Scottish governor of Islam, believe it or not. He was the governor of Medina. He was the governor of Medina in the early 19th century. The Lord Stanley and Headley, Quilliam, Pickthall, Lady Zainab Cobbold, Philby of Arabia, and many, many others. Between 1797 and 1805, Colonel James Achilles Kirkpatrick served as the British resident at the Indian court of Hyderabad, a major princely Indian state, the largest one actually in British India, which remained sort of quasi-autonomous for British imperial rule. Initially driven to advance British imperial interests, Kirkpatrick's life took a remarkable turn when he fell in love with Khairun Nisa. Khairun Nisa means the best of all women. I mean, what a wonderful name. Khairun Nisa, a Hyderabadi noble woman. He not only married her, but also embraced Islam, adopting Mughal attire and customs. This conversion led him to become a double agent, working against the East India Company in favor of the Hyderabadis. Kirkpatrick's story is emblematic of a lesser-known aspect of British rule in India, where the British, known as nabobs at the time, assimilated into Indian culture, shedding their British identity. This historical phenomenon challenged the notion of the increasingly rigid racial and religious boundaries that the British would come to assert later on in India. And Kirkpatrick's example shows a moment when love, open-mindedness, and faith subverted the imperial will to divide and conquer. This brings me to the third era, which is the age of counterculture and post-imperialism. The rise of Darwinism and the new critical historical approach to religious origins in the 19th century began to loosen the hold of Christianity amongst the educated, with the faith itself being reinvented in the mass shift from rural to urban life during Britain's industrialization. These disruptions often led the British peoples to look for and form alternatives to Christianity, and also to look outside of it. And these movements, such as Freemasonry, spiritualism, and the age of spiritualism and theosophy. That process of disruption also led some to Islam. It was the beginning of the age of the counterculture and later of post-imperialism. Centuries of trade, diplomacy, and empire brought Muslim sojourners, Muslim visitors to Britain, but converts also played central roles in the birth of an organized Islamic community in Britain between 1880 and 1920. Alongside missionary-minded Indian Muslims and with Indian and Ottoman patronage, converts played leading roles in the first two mosques in this country, in Liverpool and Woking. A short-lived third mosque in London in the late 1890s was aligned to Liverpool. All these three mosques were dawah-orientated, and converts played leading roles in all of them. These are the first three mosques. Converts played leading roles in all of these first three mosques. And converts heavily influenced the style and content of their Islamic public outreach. Liverpool was more working class and radical in its tone and outlook, while Woking was more middle class and genteel in the way that it presented Islam. The Liverpool Muslim Institute gained 243 converts over its 21 years of existence, while the Woking Muslim Mission gained 398 in its first 40 years, giving both an average conversion rate of around one a month. And I should say that it's to our detriment that we can't even produce figures like this. The first two mosques were better at understanding and recording who was converting and why than nearly any subsequent mosque. Why is 1887, a significant year? It was the first time that Islam was preached in Britain in an organized fashion. Fatima Elizabeth Cates came to Islam after hearing William Henry Abdullah Quilliam lecture on the Prophet as a great Arabian teetotaler at a temperance hall in Birkenhead. Fatima remained dauntless, despite facing great hostility from her family and from locals. The latter would accost her in the street and smear her face with horse dung. Her poignant poem, A Muslima's Prayer from 1891, conveys a profound sense of fortitude when she writes, "Beset by numerous foes, concealed along the way, we must these enemies oppose, and ever work and pray. They watch but to devour, like ravening beasts of prey, if we, in an unguarded hour, but cease to work and pray. Then may we ever heed the warning God has given, that so we may in safety tread the road that leads to heaven." And Fatima did indeed ever work and pray, and undeterred went on to co-found Britain's first mosque and function as its first treasurer. A number of women and children came to Islam at her hands. This first great era of conversion to Islam in Britain has left a remarkable literary legacy in the form of the periodicals The Crescent and the Islamic Review, the poetry of Yahya Parkinson, Marmaduke Pickthall's Quran translation, and his Middle East travelogues and his novels, and the Hajj memoir of Lady Zainab Evelyn Cobbold. Institutionally, it provided the Muslim Society of Great Britain, established in 1914 by Lord Farooq Headley, which brought together the convert leaders from Woking and Liverpool. After Headley's death, it was led by Lady Khadija Hamilton Buchanan, then Ismail de York, and finally by Lieutenant Colonel Abdullah Baines Hewitt, who functioned as anchors to a Muslim community in flux. We're talking about the interwar period before the Second World War, with more sojourners, more temporary visitors than permanent residents. I mean, that changed after the Second World War, but in this interwar period, these converts and the Muslim Society of Britain acted as anchors to keep continuity. And so that's why, in one way, they had leadership roles in the interwar period. This society didn't finish after the Second World War, so the society that Headley founded in 1914, it continued right into the 1960s. The second great era of conversion to Islam in Britain came in the 1960s and 70s, prefigured in the crossover between jazz and Islam. The conduits in this era were the Black Power movement, exemplified by Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, and the return to Islam as part of Afrocentrism, allied with the hippie counterculture, which explored alternatives to Western materialism. 60s counterculture, with its New Age spirituality, had deeper roots back into 19th century theosophy and spiritualism, where Westerners looked for spiritual enlightenment outside of Christianity and outside of Europe. Sufism was always a strand in this movement from at least 1910. developing during the course of the 20th century a distinctive form of Western Sufi universalism, a Sufism without Islam, which built on the presumptions of Orientalism. Robert Irwin's Memories of a Dervish and Abdul Latif Whiteman's Average White Man both capture a heady mix of drugs, travel, and a search for spirituality, in their case to Sufism in North Africa. Others like John Butt and Bruce Wannell found Islam further afield in Pakistan's northwest frontier province. The best known expression of this period was the Darqawi Sufi order, or the Murabatun, headed by Abdul Qadir as-Sufi, which spread to several countries after originating in Britain. One estimate says that they had 10,000 people who converted to Islam in that movement. Others were the convert-focused work of Naqshbandi Sufis, Nazim Adil al-Haqqani, and the lesser-known Abdullah Sirdan al-Jamal, or John Ross, as well as the tiny but influential Mariama order associated with Martin Lings and Hassan Laga Eaton. This second mass of conversions left two mosque communities in Britain as its legacy, the Brixton Mosque in Gresham Road and the Ehsan Mosque in Norwich, as part of the global movement of the Murabatun, with communities in the Cape Town, South Africa, and in Granada, Spain. In the late 1970s, there was an attempt by the Murabatun to set up a rural community at Wood Darling Hall in Norfolk, numbering between 150 and 200 individuals, but it was short-lived. It was not sustainable. This era left us with the Islam-infused music of Cat Stevens in pop and Richard Thompson in folk, two classic texts, the existentialist Book of Strangers by Abdul Qadir or Ian Dallas in 1972, and the widely lauded biography Muhammad, His Life Based on the Earliest Sources by Martin Lings, as well as the intellectual and religious leadership of Abdul Hakim Murad and Hamza Yusuf, both of whom converted in 1977. It also gave us the highly influential World Festival of Islam by Ahmed Pourquila, held in the UK in 1976. Divided by a common language, there has always been cross-influence between British and American convert movements, more so in the 20th century. Other American converts who've played influential roles religiously, culturally, and institutionally among British converts include Zaid Shakir, Imam Siraj Wahaj, Daniel Abdul Hayy Moore, and the late Osama Cannon. So we come to the final stage in our story, the age of Islamic establishment in Britain, which goes, for my money, from 1979 up until the present day. The earlier conversion movements occurred when the born Muslim community was still relatively small. In the early 20th century, it could not have numbered more than a few thousand permanent residents, although sojourners like soldiers, sailors, servants, and students could swell these numbers by tens of thousands at times. Even in 1970, there were only 250,000 Muslims in Britain. That picture has changed completely since, with just under 1 million in 1991, 1.6 million in 2001, 2.7 million in 2011, and 3.9 million in 2021. As such, conversion to Islam in Britain has tended to come about through Islamic revivalist direct contact with Islamic revivalist movements in Britain that focus on preaching, focus on dawah. I've chosen 1979 as the moment that marks the age of Islamic establishment in Britain for two reasons. The first reason is that mosque registrations in this country really took off after 1975 in Britain. So from 1975 onwards, there were 18 or more mosques registered every year in this country, which meant that organized Islam was being established in every British city and later in its large towns. The second reason is that the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1978-9 brought the global Islamic revival after colonialism to the attention of the entire world. And after that, Islam was news everywhere in the West, something that was profoundly accentuated in Britain by the Satanic Verses affair of 1988-89, which put British Muslims on the political map for the first time. Conversion figures in our current age dwarf the earlier ones that I described. But an accurate total figure or even rate of conversion eludes us still. One estimate by Kevin Bryce, based on an earlier census, put the figure at around 100,000 in 2010, with a conversion rate of around 5,200 a year. That would put the total in 2023 at around 168,000. Yeah, I'm wrapping up. Yeah. The latest census did not collect data on conversion, but it did give us some tantalizing figures on Muslims living in England and Wales as subdivided by ethnicity. Converts come from all ethnic backgrounds, some from ethnic groups with significant Muslim communities and others without. Thus, the figures who identified as white, English, Welsh, Northern Irish, Scottish, and British was 91,000. Make of that what you will. I mean, it's hard to entirely interpret these figures, but, they're indicative. For my money, the three most influential converting movements in the current age have been the Salafi movement, certain Sufi orders like the Shadhilis, the Ba'alawis, and the Naqshbandis, and the Tablighi Jamaat. While officially the last movement, the Tablighi Jamaat, does not preach Islam to non-Muslims, in practice, it has unofficially been active in dawah. I came to Islam myself at the hands of Falahuddin, a Tablighi worker in Manchester in 1989, and I was personally active in this movement for the next 3 years, during which I witnessed a lot of convert involvement and conversion in the movement. The years after 1979 have seen the first steps towards institutionalization and building a nascent convert community. After the pioneering efforts of the Association of British Muslims, established in 1976 by Dawood Rosser Owen, which drew inspiration directly from the early convert communities in Liverpool and Woking, the primary institutionalizing step has been the emergence of some 30 to 40 local convert reception networks around Britain. Following on from the pioneering efforts of the New Muslims Project, first mooted in 1985, I believe, Batul, led by our own very Batul Al-Toma, which provide, as I said before at the beginning of this lecture, the building blocks for a community based on compassion, care, and service. Both Yusuf Islam and Ibrahim Hewitt have made major institutional contributions to education, advocacy, and charity. We could talk of the Islamia School, the Association of Muslim Schools, we could talk of Interpal and Muslim Aid. Dawood Pidcock and Sahib Mustaqim Bahir established a short-lived Islamic Party of Great Britain in 1989. Sarah Joseph edited the youth-orientated Trends and later the lifestyle magazine Emil. Aisha Bewley has been the major pioneer in the burgeoning translation movement to bring classical Islamic literature into English, translating dozens of texts over a course of 50 years, as well as the translation of the Quran with her husband, Sheikh Abdul Haq Bewley. Since 2002, Bristol's spoken word poets Munira Rashid and Sakina Abdul Noor have opened up new avenues of convert cultural expression. Sophie Gilliatt-Ray established a Centre for the Study of Islam in the UK at the University of Cardiff in 2005. Abdurrahim Green and Yusuf Chambers established with others the international Dawah organisation IERA in 2009. Headquartered in the UK, it works on 6 continents. Abdul Hakim Murad established the Cambridge Muslim College in 2009 and the award-winning Eco-Mosque, the Cambridge Central Mosque, in 2019. Knowledge and appreciation for the history of UK convert communities has grown with the scholarship and advocacy of Muhammad Siddiq Seddon, Ismail Lee South, Abdul Malik Taylor, and Saria Sharuvilo Contractor, who's speaking later today. Leadership in the development of a new philosophical theology, a neo-Kalam, is being led by converts like Ramon Ibrahim Harvey, Hassan Spiker, and Rebecca Masterson. So after taking a long view spanning 8 centuries, we can see that the present looks bright. Islam has become as well established in Britain, and conversion rates are at an all-time high. while the convert community itself has entered a period of self-organization. At some point, the number of active mosque attendees will supplant the number of active churchgoers. As for the future of Islam in Britain and its coming opportunities and challenges, we place our trust in God and believe that outcomes lie in His hands. We might end with Abdullah Quilliam's 1894 poem in prayer, that England may soon be reclaimed from its present bigoted creed and follow the teachings of Ahmed, God's prophet in truth and in deed. Bigoted creed might mean something quite different today to what it meant back then. Britain has now become post-Christian. The census of 2021 showed that for the first time since the 7th century, only a minority of the British, 46%, identified as Christian. The Church of England clings on to establishment while its church is empty and gets sold off. Yet a closer look at the burgeoning agnosticism and atheism, the nuns, as they're called in the census, 53% of the general population of England and Wales, does not, counterintuitively, we wouldn't think this, does not preclude beliefs in the supernatural, an intermittent belief in God, openness to religious ethical teachings, or a search for spirituality. Only a third of the nuns are actively hostile to religion, so it is mistaken for us to think if somebody says they're an agnostic or an atheist that they're signed up Dorcanist, okay? As we've seen from our history, moments of great social, moral and political disruption are times when the British consider Islam as an alternative, among others. What has mattered historically still matters today, which is meaningful and large-scale contact with Islam and Muslims has brought conversion in movements, generations, and in whole groups. It is up to us to present that alternative to them as best we can. And only with God lies true success and acceptance. May God, most wise, most generous, most compassionate, guide our families and relatives to Islam. And make us a means rather than an impediment to whole groups of Fawajah entering into the deen. Make us ambassadors of Islam rather than its gatekeepers, and turn the hearts of the British peoples for only God, only Allah is the real turner of the hearts. And may God send blessings and peace upon the noble messenger, the last and the greatest of the prophets. Ameen. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. Is it time for questions, or have I taken the time? Okay.
I think what we'll do is we'll take some Q&A if we have some time just after the end of the presentation, if that's all right.
Do you want to do that now?
No, I'll do that after mine, if that's
right,
okay. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm just tiny compared to this lady. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Yahya. That was a splendid presentation, giving us a whole range of history that, I mean, some of us might have known already, but I'm sure it has been enlightening for so many here. I just picked up one thing when the people who converted to Islam back in history were considered either wretched or in despair. So we have a hall full of wretched and despairing people here today. Well, I'm not sure about being wretched and despair. I don't think I ever was, but I did feel that actually maybe I did feel a lot of despair from time to time after I became a Muslim, particularly when the practice failed to reflect the theory that we all so endearingly hung on to in all the reading of the miles and miles of books were all given as presents when we converted to Islam. Thank you so much, Yahya. Wonderful keynote address. Thank you. And now over to Kerry. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'll just readjust the mic. Oh, Jazakallah for that, brother. What an enlightening, well-researched delivery there of our history of conversion in the UK. It's so important that as converts to Islam, we actually claim that history. And I just want to say that you here in the room are the people that will be talked about in the future. You know, I'm so delighted that everyone here today is part of this. So follow Ya, I must. So I'm now going to go to the business of actually launching the Convert Care platform. So first of all, here we go. I've got a little video. So I've also got some testimonials from some of the people who would have liked to have joined us today. Not that one. There we go.
Dear sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May God's peace, mercy and blessings be with all of you today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with the name of God, all merciful, most merciful. Many congratulations on the launch of the new Convert Care project. I pray to Allah that it is a success and it is blessed. Now, of course, all of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, were converts or reverts. And there's a verse in the Quran which reminds believers to keep their hearts humble to the message and the remembrance of God. And Abu Bakr had been a Muslim for decades, and this verse was recited to a group of new converts and they burst into tears, on which Abu Bakr commented that our hearts have become hardened. That verse says, beware against allowing a long time to pass so that your hearts may become hardened. So it is always refreshing to be in touch with brothers and sisters who hear the revelation of the message for the first time. And it is a huge source of inspiration to all of us. May God bless us and accept us and be with us in all of our journeys. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your sister Alia. I am the founder and CEO of a registered charity called Solace UK, and we focus on providing support for those who have embraced Islam, who find themselves in difficulty post-Shahada. I am really sad that I can't be there to join you over the weekend at the launch of Convert Care, but I just wanted to send this message to say that as a fellow revert myself, I fully support the efforts of Convert Care. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place much barakah in this weekend, in the training, in the networking. And I look forward to seeing you, inshallah, at future events. May Allah bless this immensely. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kathleen Roach Nagy. I'm Managing Director of Approachable Parenting. The Convert Muslim Foundation is doing such great work. We all need to be shouting about this. It's wonderful to see this new resource on their website where converts can actually type in their postcode to find out the person that's nearest to them that can give them help and support and mentor them in this transition. Have a great day. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Christiana, and so sad to miss the Convert Care launch program. I'm very pleased to say that Al Manar is also part of the Convert Care program now, We have Abdul Rahman, the director of the Al Manar Mosque, attending. And for now, anyway, I wish you a fabulous time with Batul in Leicestershire. And inshallah, see you there again, either on Zoom or perhaps in person next year for the next Convert Care event. Enjoy. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Salam alaikum and welcome to all at the Muslim Foundation for Converts. My name is Dr. Yvonne Ridley and I am based in the Scottish Borders. As many of you will be embarking on your spiritual journey, we wish you all the best. Blessings from the Scottish Borders to all of you from myself and my husband here at Asli Adventure Holidays. Salam alaikum.
And in fact, more and more well-wishing has been coming in, but unfortunately I didn't have time to format them to present to you. Perhaps I'll share those with you a bit later. So on to actually talking about Convert Care, the website that is there as a resource for those interested in Islam or who have just accepted Islam. I can say from my own experience, I accepted Islam 18 years ago now, that along with the many highs that come with accepting Islam, there can be a few challenges along the way too. And I can say from my own experience, who went it alone in the first few years, that actually finding community is the real key to success in helping you, find that spiritual connection, finding connection with individuals. Accepting Islam is life-changing, and adapting to those changes is hard enough. We don't want finding support to be one of those barriers. We believe that in-person support is the best type of support. That's what's going to make your journey a little bit easier and comfortable as possible. And Convert Care is here to make finding that dedicated help easy. So through the Convert Care network, individuals can connect with dedicated local support organisations and experienced members of the community who offer guidance and can give a sense of belonging. These Convert Care initiatives have been working for years, providing the support on the grassroots and help individuals to transition as they embrace Islam. And they understand and address the unique challenges of converts. We all have our own different journeys and our own way that we found Islam, but there is a shared experience that we all have that we can share and address together. These places are safe spaces without judgment, and they encourage the social and spiritual connections and community. And actually, this Convert Care initiative goes further than that. It goes further than actually just allowing converts to find support. We also, through the conference, for example, today, it fosters collaboration, sharing best practice and learning from across the network. And this actual sharing of knowledge ensures the highest quality of support services for the convert community. And as well, we are working towards support to actually securing the future of Convert Care and indigenising Islam in the UK. These are just a few of the currently signed up initiatives throughout the UK. So I'm now going to play another video of a wonderful young lady called Ellie Quinn Belhaj. I had the opportunity to connect with her, and I've been following her journey with interest. She converted to Islam a couple of years ago. She was a very well-known travel blogger, and she's now been documenting her own journey via social media. And she can do these things so much more professionally than me. So I asked her if she wouldn't mind contributing and actually demonstrating the website.
ConvertCare.org has officially launched, and this is a fantastic platform for convert Muslims and those looking into Islam. I know many people find it hard to find organisations to help them, whether that's do their shahada or find local mosque circles. And ConvertCare has been designed to easily find dedicated support for you, near you. So let's go and see how it works. First off, we put our details into the box on the home screen. I'll use a few postcodes from my old addresses. Let's do Cardiff first. Advise if you are Muslim or not. Either answer is okay, of course. Tick the relevant boxes and search. Here I can see 2 organisations in the Cardiff area who have facilities to help new Muslims, like taking the Shahada with someone, circles, social events, one-to-one help, and so much more. What's great is once on the organisation profile, you can contact them directly yourself via the mobile number given or the website or the general inquiry form. And all of their social media profiles are linked too. For another location, let's look at Manchester, and you can see that there are more and different organisations here for someone in this area to contact. And then for London, there are even more too. There's also an events section which will be updated, blogs and articles to read through. And if you know of an organisation doing great work to help new and convert Muslims, but they aren't on here, you can tell them about Convert Care. They can sign up for free and go through the registration process with Convert Care.
Mashallah, she did a great job.
ConvertCare.org has officially ConvertCare.org has
Doing her again. There we go. Yes, so good. I'll show it again. So I just want to finish off by acknowledging a few people that have made this project possible. And obviously, a big part of that is the Convert Muslim Foundation and trustees that have supported this project. Also, we've got Squarespace, who provided the website design. Ellie Quinn Belhaj herself, who just provided that video we just saw. And also Elias Foy, a really talented photographer who I'm hoping actually is here in the audience. And he provided some wonderful photographs that provided the backdrop for our website. So that's the end of our presentation. We will hopefully have some time perhaps that you can ask Brother Yahya Burt some questions. We will be having lunch and actually as well I'd like to have the opportunity for us all to take some photos together just to commemorate the event as well. Thank you so much.
I'm going to kind of attempt the impossible. So while we're still on the live stream, if I ask Yahya to come back up again, if that's okay, we're going to see if we can take on about maybe 3 questions. Let's start with 3 and then we'll go from there. Because we've managed to squeeze some extra time out of the schedule. Has anybody particularly got a question for Yahya? Hands up. If not, I will offer one myself. The thing that got me was, other than the quite long history of converts in England, could you say something perhaps around the idea of, are we maybe looking at a golden age of converts in England and the UK currently?
Yes. No, I mean, I think that was what I was trying to say in the lecture, that, you know, since really the last 40 years, this is our, if you take a long 800-year view, this is really us coming of age. And, you know, as I said, we have no accurate figures for how many people there are. Maybe it's something like hundreds, you know, one educated guess is about 170,000, something like that. But, you know, and the one educated guess at a rate is about just over 5,000 a year. But, you know, that research is quite old. I mean, one of the things I would advocate is that we, and I think we're organising and we're contributing across the whole range of things. I gave a lot of examples at the end, a whole range of different areas of endeavour, whether it's institution building, whether it's scholarship, whether it's religious leadership. You know, converts are making a great contribution to the whole Muslim community and to society. But also, I said, we also here today, we're organising and building a community for the long term. And, you know, I'm trying to encourage us to look, yeah, there might be a specific issue around poor reception and we're trying to improve that. But I think we we just look at where we are now and think, actually, let's just build a community as a whole, and let's just build from what we're doing now, and just think of a multi-generational community that inshallah is here to stay. And so I think that's how we have to see ourselves now. We should have the confidence to do that, and we should go for it. That's what I'm trying to encourage us to say. Yes, a golden age that we can build on.
I think that's an important part of it, with this getting the sustainability, but also perhaps maybe at some point time to celebrate some successes as well. Yeah. Was there a question at the back there?
Yeah, just about, Yahya was saying there's so many converts, throughout our 800-year history, but there's no kind of central place or repository. Mosques are perhaps not recording, it's kind of very informal. Sometimes when people convert, it can be quite risky, you don't want to make things too public and so on. But I'm just wondering, just with your kind of research and academic background and with these organizations, how do you think it might be possible to collate data so that we've got good quality data, so we can kind of have our services geared towards the right demographics? There might be younger people and the services might not be suitable for others. So I'm just wondering what kind of thought process there could be to kind of get good quality information from mosques and organizations about converts.
So how do we start collating better data in regards to converts in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll hear more later on from some of the other academics who are here, like Saria. But from my perspective, I think it's really important that we, perhaps through Convert Care, through the Convert Muslim Foundation, that we all come together and we actually, have an element of data collection that's separate from the Shahada form. Obviously, you have to get people's consent for that, but I think it would be important for us to understand, where possible, who's converting, where, when, and so on, because we actually need that understanding in order to really help people, help our growing community. So I think we ought to go back to the early pioneers, like Abdullah Quilliam and others who actually kept pretty meticulous records. I think we should start that up again. There's no reason why we can't do that. I think we have to be careful that we don't turn it into a bragging competition. That's very, very possible. So it has to be, kind of done in the right spirit, with the right intention, as the Sheikh was saying at the beginning. This is not to sort of brag and boast about numbers. This is really about looking out for people and understanding who's coming in and how we can help them sort of feel at home, and so on, and understand, really we don't have a good enough understanding of what's driving people to convert today, other than the big things that I said to you at the moment, which is Islam. The contactability for people for Islam is everywhere now. There are mosques in every city, and I think that there's a lot of disruption going on in British society, so people are looking for alternatives. So I think those two things, when those two things come together, you get conversions. That's what our history shows us. So, but the detail of that, the detail of what's driving that, I think we could know more. And, I'm sure there is more research out there that I've not tapped into, but I can look into it, inshallah.
Got a couple of other questions as well. One of the sisters was wanting to know, will the talk be available to read or possibly contained in an article somewhere? It will be available on our social media channels as well in terms of the video. And then the other question was, what is the difference between a community, a network, and a population? Are we really a community, or are we really one of the other?
Okay. So just see the first question again. Yeah. So I mean, I have an idea for a book, because I said there's no book that charts the history of conversion to Islam, as far as I'm aware, in English. Conversion of conversion to Islam in Britain. So I really, in a way, that lecture was a long pitch for a new book. So inshallah, I'll make dua. If I can get some support to take a year out, some financial support to take a year out, maybe to research it properly, then I can produce a book at the end of that, inshallah. Nothing too long, but long enough to give you detail, the kind of detail that I'd like to go into a bit more for each of the 4 ages that I mentioned. I want to interview some of our elders and get those oral histories before they pass on, because some of them are very old and it's very difficult to get them to talk. You have to go on a charm offensive for a couple of years before you get some of our elders to talk. about the old days, because they think they're boasting, but they're not. They're just preserving our history. So I'm trying to so that would help me to do that work. I think the second question, can I just have that in front of me? Yeah. So I think that it's a great question. I think, my personal credo is that I believe community starts with each one of us. We make community. Community is not something that's out there. We make it by how we interact with each other. Do we show care, compassion? Can we listen? Are we not bound up just with our own things? Can we help someone else? So I think that's where community starts. It starts with each one of us. Of course, we live in a society which is very individualistic, and we're kind of taught in a way to hustle and to sort of, everybody has to be a kind of entrepreneurial type. But actually, let's take that energy and redirect that back into being compassionate and looking out for each other. And I know there are lots of cracks in our society. We can't fill all those cracks, but at least let's do what we can. And I think that the difference between a network and a community is that community has an ethic of care. A community is an ethic of care and compassion. That's the difference. And of service. And of solidarity. A network is just a means to connect. That's the difference. So a network should become a community. So this network, this is what I'm saying, we are saying at the top of my lecture, we should avoid a technocratic language. Okay, the back room, we have to be professionals, we have to deal with form filling and fundraising and all of that, but don't let that language come into our gatherings. In our gatherings, we come, we console, we listen, and we inspire each other by language of faith. That's what we do in our gatherings. And we also should come together to socialize and to celebrate. As you're saying just now, we can't just come just to work. When we come together, we come as a community and we celebrate. We have some good times together. We make some happy memories as well. It's not just that we shouldn't, not every time we get together should be just business. I think we have to build a community. It's not just about business, although that obviously is part of it. So we need to get that right. Are we a population? Well, when you think of a population, you think of a bean counter from government going around counting how many people there are, but certainly, how do we get, there's a difference between a population and a people. A people have a history, a people have an identity or whatever. What identity do we British converts have as a people, as a community? All right. We should think about that. And that's why I say we need our own one. I'm an historian. Of course, I'm going to say we need to know our own history. But I hope you agree with me that if we know our history, it will make us stronger. It'll make us feel that we're part of something. We're part of a tradition, and we have something we can draw inspiration from and also build on in our generation and leave something for our kids. That's what it's about, inshallah. Make our own history. But we still have to look back in order to look forward. That's my belief anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Yahya Bert. I think that's a nice way to end before lunch. As somebody once said to me, the amazing thing is that we might be part of somebody else's dua. We might be the fulfillment of somebody else's dua from a long time ago. So we're coming to the end of the live stream part. This was not on the program, so I have no idea what's coming. But it would appear that we have something of a cake. But we will be taking some photos as well at the front here just before you all run off, because I'm sure you're all very hungry. And we invite you to kind of stay for a bit of lunch and nibbles and networking. But we're just going to do some photos first. But I will officially sign off in terms of the live stream. If you have been watching at home, or if you have been watching on the social media channels, thank you very much for joining us. And inshallah, we will see you again. Or if you have any questions, obviously visit our website and contact us soon. But if I can ask the attendees who don't mind, if they want to come towards the front, and we're going to have something of a photo with the cake, I believe. So, but thank you very much, and then we'll let you go for lunch. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa